Helping our parents adjust to old age is part of life's cycle. Sometimes slowly, sometimes suddenly, we find ourselves with more and more responsibility for looking after them. It can start with small jobs, the garden, the shopping, and over time it becomes more and more intensive. We may watch our parents caring for each other and see them start to struggle. Our instincts are to want to help, but that can become unwelcome. Adjusting from these big emotional roles is a big emotional step for both parent and the child. With me is Dr. Ratama Semola, Dr. Darren Green, and Dr. Bruce Bradfield, a clinical psychologist. Welcome to Doctor's Orders, everyone.
Thank you.
So how old is old?
I kind of believe that it's more about the person's experience of feeling alive, and how that starts to shift, and when that starts to shift in a particular way, and you start to know, I'm old now.
You're feeling old. And the young people will start telling you you're old.
I guess so.
It starts with me already. But there are a lot of changes associated with becoming elderly. For example, there are physiological changes, there are cognitive changes, there are emotional changes, psychological changes. We'll chat a little bit about that.
Well, physically, things will happen that people can see.
Yes.
You'll start being a bit more frail. You may start developing chronic illnesses, or those illnesses that generally come with age. Your bones become thin, you also get fractures. Your body may become a bit smaller due to other physiological changes as well. So you can get the physical things on the outside and also on the inside.
Cognitively, and what happens to the brain is quite remarkable as we age, and it's inevitable, I'm afraid, although there are some new things that have been identified to help slow down the process of aging, natural aging of the cells of the brain. And we speak about a term called atrophy, which means wasting.
Yes.
And as we get older, the brain shrinks. And that then leads, depending on which parts of the brain are involved, to a host of symptoms in the person's ability to communicate in their daily lifestyles. And those cognitive or thinking changes are quite scary for the person experiencing them.
I think this word atrophy is an important one to kind of hinge the experience on, because it links to loss at various levels. There's loss of an experience of physical adeptness and control. There's loss of an experience of being able to moderate one's feelings. There's loss of actual people who are passing away as we age.
Yes. So how do families actually plan for this? Because I know a lot of family members may be reluctant to discuss the issue of a parent getting older, whereas family meetings must be actually beneficial.
So I would say that the first place would be to acknowledge that a lot of the time what families do is arrange themselves around a need to avoid too much pain.
They avoid it.
So the conversations don't happen over time. The problem gets bigger, by which time families feel quite frightened of saying, look, you're at that place in your life where we, as your children, need to step in and take from you your independence, your self-reliance, your management of your financial life. If that conversation happens too late, it can be terrifying.
So it must be very difficult to deal with the interplay between maintaining autonomy in the elderly person versus actually looking after them. They may notice that they start hurting themselves or not being able to take care of themselves, and you want to assist them and they don't want the help. How do you maintain a good balance between actually helping them remain independent and actually assisting them?
Well, it becomes easy to deal with that if it was of gradual onset. But should it happen suddenly, somebody suffers a major heart attack or a stroke, or they have a fracture and they can no longer walk, then, you have to be very sensitive when you approach it, because now this person was actually still functioning as normal. Their independence is fully there. So in their head, they're still who they are, and they feel helpless and frustrated. So we have to approach it in a sensitive way, be respectful always. If you have routines, like in the person who's got dementia, if you set routines, they tend to then be more proactive. They know what to expect, and they don't forget so easily what to do, because they can just take it off the list. Reward, if they do something good, give them something so they can boost their self-esteem. Spend more time with this person. I think if you spend time together, the person's more trusting, and therefore it's easier for you to suggest things if you see that things are going the wrong way.
And also, families really plan for the eventuality of someone becoming unable to take care of themselves. What can families do when it actually starts becoming practically a problem?
Well, I guess I'd like to pick up on the idea of trust as something that is more about the process that the family goes through, such that by the time someone gets to a place where their reliance can't be on themselves, but on someone external to themselves. The trust relationship has to be so firmly in place, such that you can say, I don't believe that I need what you think I need, but I believe you when you say to me that I need it. So there's that sense of my trust in you is actually greater than my faith in myself to know what's good for me.
There are times when it's not so easy to be handed or to hand over that authority to let other people make the decisions for you. And I think when that conflict situation does arise in families amongst or between the siblings and the person that's aging, we need a definitive, objective means of assessing the situation.
Yes.
And often we use quantifiable means to do so in the form of neuropsychiatry testing. And that would determine, what level of control needs to be handed over to family members legally.
So if family members can't deal with the situation of looking after the elderly, obviously the ideal situation would be the family has the capacity to look after the elderly family member. But what if they don't have the capacity? What other options are out there?
Well, you've got frail care facilities where the person would be admitted in, and if they're on medication, the center or the staff there will be responsible for administering all the care. But there's also hospices if somebody's actually very, very ill and terminally ill.
And I think for people that aren't as severely affected, they start off initially with aging by going to what's called a retirement village. Some of them are very grandiose with golf courses and so forth. But the people that can't afford it and the people that use state health facilities, for example, ask, what can I do? Well, the good news is there is help. And there's what we call home-based care systems that are funded by NGOs and government that actually go into the communities and help in the homes, for example, where there isn't enough help and care in those families. And that's made a difference, I feel.
And what do they actually teach the families?
Well, they'll teach the family how to cope with things like toilet habits, for example, dealing with those dependence and independence issues. They'll teach the family how, if someone's bedridden, similar to hospice, how to turn the patient, what you can do practically on the bed, using a sheep's skin and that kind of thing. They'll also look at some basic hygiene tips around, obviously, caring and personal hygiene that might go out of the window as you start aging as well. So really practical points.
I find that the home-based care provides also support, emotional support, because you don't feel alone, because there is somebody there to hold your hand, which is very important. So,
Bruce, is the gold standard for the family to look after the family member?
I would disagree as a principle, because I think that it can be ideal if the family is adequately resourced. But if they're not, then it can be too much pressure on both the family and on the person who is being taken care of. It can take on an unhealthy level of burdensomeness.
Yes.
And also this idea of feeling very, very alone. If you're the only elderly person in one home, you can feel very, very isolated. So I would say that if you can share your process of growing old with others who are taken care of in a 24-hour kind of way, then it's potentially a much, much safer experience. Often families feel very guilty about taking that step, and that's for them to work through. That's a separate process, a separate range of feelings, but potentially a wiser decision to make.
So how do we actually prepare as individuals for our own inevitable aging?
Well, physically, I always say prevention is best. If you can avoid things which will age you faster, look after yourself. If you have chronic illnesses, manage them. Do your regular checkups. Know your family history. Know what to expect.
And of course, what about diet? I mean, everyone speculates about what to eat, what not to eat to prevent you aging before your time. And certainly, from the skin right through to the brain cells, we all know we must take our supplements if we're not getting enough in our natural fruit and vegetables. Important. Enough sleep, I think, is also important. And then the other thing is simply keeping your brain active.
Yes.
Old people that do crossword puzzles and play Sudoku seem to be just so much more on the ball. But I think you mustn't start when you get to 60, 70. Start now.
Crossword puzzles.
Obviously, I would advocate some form of support, certainly family, certainly social, and potentially psychological. And I think, for me, a lot of the time when people enter a psychotherapeutic service, they're surprised by the fact that actually what we do is help people learn how to relate to their pain in a healthy way, rather than help them not feel that pain. So my sense is, do what you need to do to learn how to relate to your pain, your anxiety, in a healthy way. and often that just means doing a lot of reflection and seeking support.
Thank you everyone for a wonderful and very informative discussion.